Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and for the first time in over a year, one of my favorite cups in Go Battle League, the Ultra Premier Cup, makes its glorious return. This is a 2500 CP format where legendaries, mythicals, and ultra beasts have been banned, so some of the top meta mons that we're used to, like Giratina and Registeel, are not allowed. And in this Ultra Premier meta, the new Community Day Incineroar looks to be an insanely fun closer if you get it a small energy lead or shield advantage. I tested it out in some Ultra Premier practice battles, and the sweeps were glorious. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. Tough lead in the first match, Annihilate into Skeledirge. I save switch into Shadow Feraligatr, and my opponent is going to respond with Shadow Gallade. Now, Shadow Gallade is lightning fast, going to be able to outpace the Feraligatr, but the good news for me in this matchup is that the Shadow Claws are absolutely shredding through their HP bar. So my goal is just to go for a double shield and a farm down so I can win switch advantage and realign the Skeledirge onto my Incineroar, because Incineroar absolutely crushes Skeledirge. We got the Gallade out of the way, opponent is going to send in Tentacruel, so winning switch advantage was incredibly important. Now my Hydro Cannons are going to be resisted here, but this is the power of Shadow Feraligatr on the save switch. Just being able to output so much damage even when resisted. I overfarmed one extra Shadow Claw to hopefully force a CMP tie, and I did get the CMP tie. That's absolutely massive. And now my opponent has to try and sweep with Skeledirge, but Skeledirge is going to have an absolutely awful day going up against the Community Day Shiny Incineroar. They go for the Disarming Voice. That's not going to be a problem. I end up throwing one Snarl and the move to make sure that I don't go over 100 energy. Darkest Lariat does get shielded. They're going for the Disarming Voice, but guess what? This is not going to be enough to KO. Incineroar withstands the damage, makes it to the Darkest Lariat, and this is going to be massive overkill. Goodbye, Skeledirge. In comes the Tentacruel, and one counter from the Annihilate means game over. Terrible lead in the next match, Annihilate into Galarian Weezing. I save switch into Feraligatr. My opponent is going to respond with their own Annihilate. This is great. My goal with the Feraligatr save switch is to check for any Pokemon that could potentially be a problem for Incineroar in the back, like baiting out a Tentacruel, a Poliwrath, a Greedent, or in this case, surprisingly, an Annihilate. So I am going to shield up the Shadow Ball, get a full farm down, and just take switch advantage. If they're going to let me take switch, I will happily take switch. They're going to send back in the Weezing, and I'm at back-to-back Hydro Cannons. I believe I can farm up one more and go for the CMP tie, but I miscounted. I misremembered how much residual energy they had, but thankfully the Brutal Swing barely does not KO, and I'm barely able to hang on and make one final Hydro. They will get the Fairy Wind farm down, but now I can send in Incineroar, and even if they are running Play Rough would be very okay here. It's only going to hit for neutral damage, so I'm going to let it go. Opponent goes for the Brutal Swing, so it looks like they are probably running, my best guess would be Brutal Swing and Overheat, so the energy is going to be walled, but they commit the shield. And that makes me think that my Incineroar is valuable in the back, so I decided to commit the shield, and it is the Overheat. I could have survived it, but it seems in this moment that preserving HP on the Incineroar will help me out. So I shield the first Overheat. The second one, it's debuffed, so it's not going to do a lot. I'm going to farm up to 100, go for the Blast Burn, and now I have a Blast Burn loaded for whatever's in back, and it's an XL Oranguru. Oh no, it's Darkest Lariat time. The Darkest Lariat nearly one-shots from full HP. Oranguru is now going to get knocked out by the Blast Burn, and Incineroar in the endgame with an energy lead. I mean, both Blast Burn and Darkest Lariat just do way too much damage. We see a tough lead in the next match, Annihilate versus Shadow Dragonite. Now, Shadow Dragonite, this team is a bit soft too, so it's going to take a team effort to get rid of it. I build up to the Shadow Ball, bait with the Night Slash, get the boost, opponent now going to send in Golisopod. I build up to the Shadow Ball. I'm pretty sure this just KOs because I'm boosted, so I feel pretty good baiting, but my opponent calls the bait, and I immediately regret the decision to bait there. Oh man, I usually try not to bait when I'm up a shield, but I was thinking I'm boosted, so surely they have to shield it, but they don't. And now I'm going to send in the Shadow Feraligatr. They go for the Liquidation, fishing for a potential debuff. I'm able to overfarm quite a bit, and Hydro Cannon will be able to pick up the KO. They have a ton of energy on this Dragonite, but they're not going to send it in. They're going to send in a Feraligatr of their own, and it's actually the regular Feraligatr, and this is actually worse for me, because the Hydro Cannons are going to be doing a lot less to a regular. I overfarm, and I end up winning the CMP tie over my opponent. That is quite nice, as I'm able to get them very low, and now It's all up to Incineroar. Incineroar is up a shield, but the Dragonite still has a ton of saved energy. They're farming up energy with the Feraligatr. In comes the Dragonite, and I have a choice to make. I decide to call the bait. They go for the Dragon Claw, and with that bait call, maybe there's a chance that I can win this game. I'm going to be shielding up the Incineroar as they go for the Dragon Claw. I click the Blast Burn, so I am going to go for an undercharge to try and set up a farm. My opponent actually ends up committing a shield. I'm going to look to overfarm as much as I possibly can, go for the Blast Burn. This one will be able to knock out, and then it's going to be a race. Feraligatr needing to double up on charge attacks. Incineroar able to withstand the Shadow Claws. They have a Hydro Cannon, I have a Blast Burn. It all comes down to this, and Incineroar wins charge attack priority. Fire types counter water types confirmed, and Incineroar takes the win. Great lead in the next match, leading the Annihilate into a Shadow Poliwrath, and interestingly enough, this is actually a Mudshot Poliwrath. We did see a little bit of an uptick in the Open Ultra League of Mudshot Poliwraths. My opponent is going to save switch into their Shadow Feraligatr as I fire off my Shadow Ball. That does quite a lot of damage, and now I can descend in my own Feraligatr. Counter is typically what I prefer to run on the Poliwrath just because you have a lot of fast attack pressure, but we have seen some people opt for the Mudshot because Mudshot does allow you to generate more energy and spam out those charge attacks faster. Hydro Cannon will pick up the KO. I was debuffed by the Crunch, so unfortunately, my Feraligatr is not going to be here for too much longer. They send in the Poliwrath, but this is the Mudshot Poliwrath, so the question is, can they Mudshot down? Looks like the answer is no, and that actually worked out great for me. I'm more than happy to let this through. I can send in the Annihilate, and they have Jellicent in the back. This is going to be a bit of an interesting endgame. The Jellicent does have the energy head start, and Surf does quite a lot of damage, but I do heavily resist their fast attack of Hex, so they're doing basically no fast move pressure, so they need 4 Surfs to win it. They've already landed 1, so they're going to need 3 more after this. I successfully bait once, and I'm going for another bait, and I get both shields with 2 baits. The Darkest Lariat pressure forces my opponent into shielding 2 moves that would have been resisted, and now I try and make it to the Darkest Lariat. They go for the catch. It's unsuccessful, and this will be a win. They Icy Wind to pick up the KO, but I can go for the Snarl Down with Incineroar. Jellicent, all the energy in the world, but it's not going to matter as Incineroar wins charge attack priority. Darkest Lariat connects. Down goes Jellicent, and that's game over. Tough lead in the next match. We've seen this lead before. The Annihilate versus the Dragonite. I'm going to be firing off the Night Slash, faking a potential Ice Punch. My opponent is going to commit the shield. Oh, my opponent just able to outpace. I decide to let this through. They overfarm by quite a bit, but their timing there was very nice. They decide to stay in here. They know that this is a Night Slash that they will be able to survive, so they are going to let that through. I send in the Shadow Feraligatr. Shadow Feraligatr, I decide to commit the shield as I do want to preserve some health. They'll be switching here, and they're going to send in Skarmory. XL Skarmory is very highly ranked in this cup, so it'll be interesting to see who has the XLs and is willing to build it. This is going to be really close. This is a CMP tie. I think Hydro might knock out, but I actually want to go for an undercharge here because I'd rather get farm on Incineroar. In hindsight, maybe I should have undercharged a little bit more, and they go for the Brave Bird, so I'm not going to get as much farm. So now I am regretting that undercharge. In the back, it's Greedent, and this is really unfortunate. The opponent making the team read that Greedent would be valuable in the back brought in Skarmory into what's a negative matchup for the Skarmory going up against the Feraligatr, and that team read looks to have just won them the game. I'm going to look to overfarm, wait, try for the catch. The catch is unsuccessful. In comes the Dragonite. Incineroar gets the full Snarl farm down. My opponent, I believe, has back-to-back charge attacks, so it's going to come down to this. Can I survive a Body Slam? This is a CMP tie. If I survive, I win the game. Blast Burn is shielded. Come on, Incineroar. I know I don't have the most amazing stats ever on it. The Body Slam does just knock out, and we lose a heartbreaking game. Tough lead in the next match, leading the Annihilate into Shadow Feraligatr. I'm going to save switch into my own Feraligatr. My opponent stays in to go for a Hydro, and that works out very nicely for me. I am not going to be shielding this. Opponent now going to send in a Shadow Ampharos. and Ampharos is going to take a ton of damage from Shadow Hydro Cannon. They commit the shield. They are going to get fully farmed down. Sorry, they're going to fully farm down me the other way around, and I'm going to send in the Annihilate. As long as they don't have Zap Cannon, I can survive whatever they throw. Most people have been running Focus Blast in case the Ampharos gets met with a potential Greedent, so thankfully it is just going to be the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing number 2 will get me low, but it will not KO, and now I can fire off the Shadow Ball. I decided to go for an undercharge. I was looking for farm on the Incineroar, but it does end up KOing anyway, and I'm just looking to switch into my Incineroar. They're going to send back in the Feraligatr. Feraligatr farming up a ton of energy. They try for a catch onto the, oh my goodness, onto the Skeledirge, but I'm able to hold on to the energy, go for the Darkest Lariat. That picks up the one-hit KO. Unfortunately, my opponent gets one turn bring in there, so when they throw after one Shadow Claw, I end up getting a sneak that I probably should not get, which is definitely unfortunate. I can just go straight Blast Burn here. My opponent is going to let it through, but I should be able to get the full Snarl down and take the game. We've got a mirror lead in the next match, Annihilate versus Annihilate. I run a higher attack spread in the Ultra League, so I should win charge attack priority over quite a few of my opponents, and I do win charge attack priority here. Baiting with the Night Slash, they call the bait, and that's bad. I decide to call it back. If they called, hopefully they baited. They did not, and I'm in a lot of trouble. I send in the Shadow Feraligatr. Opponent is going to respond with an Ampharos. Ampharos will be met with the Shadow Hydro Cannon. They can throw here to deny the energy, but they don't. It looks like they're potentially going to try and look for a farm down, so I'm able to make a second Hydro Cannon, force the shield, and a potential threat of a third Hydro Cannon forces them to throw energy. They go for the Trailblaze. Trailblaze is, of course, going to be boosting up their attack, so they should be on Trailblaze and Brutal Swing. I decide to shield once. Like, their moves are going to be resisted here, but I do want to preserve a little bit of HP because I'm very much relying on Incineroar to sweep this endgame. They go for the Brutal Swing. That's boosted, so it will add up. I'm going to farm up to 100 energy and then go for the Blast Burn. I want to have a Blast Burn loaded, so if they send in the Annihilate, I can just get rid of it right away. In comes the Annihilate, and I'm going to be able to knock it out with the Blast Burn. What do they have in back? It's going to be Feraligatr, but it's a regular Feraligatr. If it was the Shadow Feraligatr, then Darkest Lariat plus Snarls would knock out, but this is the regular, so they will barely be able to hang on, and I'm going to need a catch to win this game. They're one Shadow Claw away from their move, so I'm going to wait, switch, and get the game-winning catch onto the Annihilate. Oh my goodness. Now we can send back in Incineroar, and Incineroar able to outpace the Feraligatr by one singular turn. Blast Burn KOs, and we're able to take the win. Tough lead in the next match, Annihilate versus the Charizard. I send in the Feraligatr, and my opponent responds with Magnezone. I'm going to go for the Hydro Cannon. Opponent is going to let that through since they're the non-Shadow. And right here, I'm going to make a game-losing mistake. If your opponent has a Shadow Charizard, you really do not want to go down shields, as I win switch advantage, but I'm down a shield to a Shadow Charizard. So I've made a pretty massive misplay. My opponent sends in Goodra. I go for the Ice Beam, hoping against hope that they end up giving me the shield back, but they don't. They're playing it perfectly, and I now don't have a way to win this game. I can send in the Annihilate. They bring back in the Shadow Charizard, but Shadow Charizard, I mean, these Blast Burn users, if you give them an energy and a shield advantage, it's just basically over for you. And unfortunately, my Blast Burn user is the one at the energy and shield disadvantage. My opponent lets me get to the second Blast Burn, but then I realized their plan. They're not throwing a move into my Incineroar. They're just fully farming all the way down. They can very comfortably make double Blast Burn. My only hope is that for some reason they bait, but they know better than that. They go for the Blast Burn. This Night Slash won't even KO. So this game is a very good reminder that you don't want to go down shields if your opponent has a Shadow Charizard, because you're definitely going to pay the price. Moving into the next match, leading the Annihilate into Dragalge. Dragalge farming up a ton of energy. I decide to go for the Night Slash bait. Dragalge versus Annihilate. I've been the Dragalge in this matchup, and it felt really uncomfortable trying to call a bait. So my bait call ends up working out. They go for the Aqua Tail. They're at 2, so I try and go for a potential catch onto Feraligatr in case they undertap to deny the Shadow Ball. But instead, they end up farming up a ton of energy. They throw the Outrage, and I do get the shield call right. They send in Wall Rain, and Wall Rain is going to be a wall to energy from Feraligatr, but look at this, man. Even though it is walled, the damage output from the Feraligatr is wild. This Hydro Cannon, not going to knock out, but this is actually perfect. They can go for the Earthquake, and I am not farming down with the Annihilate. I'm farming down with the Incineroar, and Incineroar up 3 Snarls is just a terrifying Pokemon to deal with. In comes the Shadow Feraligatr. I fire off the Darkest Lariat. Darkest Lariat is able to connect, and I get the combo play with the Night Slash on the Annihilate. They're forced to commit the shield. Back in comes Dragalge. I'm unable to make it to the Shadow Ball. I'll have to settle for the Night Slash. The Night Slash does valuable damage, but does not put it into a range where I can snarl down. They fire off a charge attack. I do survive an Aqua Tail. That is, of course, going to do a lot less than a Hydro Cannon, and now I have to overfarm. I'm unable to get the farm down, so I'm forced to go for the Blast Burn on the CMP tie. Blast Burn will pick up the KO. In comes Feraligatr, trying to get the back-to-back, but they're not able to get there. Incineroar sweeping yet another endgame, and we're able to take the win. All in all, I had a ton of fun getting to use Incineroar. This definitely feels like a meta that is better suited for it compared to something like the Open Ultra League, just because the bulk is a little bit lower in this league. So your Darkest Lariat and your Blast Burns definitely feel like they do go a little bit further in the Ultra Premier format. Now, it goes without saying, much like using something like a Shadow Charizard, if you end up with this mon in like a shield or energy disadvantage situation, it's going to be a lot harder to use it. It really likes having that energy or shield advantage, and then it's a very deadly sweeper. Plays a lot like the Shadow Charizard, but just of course with the different typing. Whereas the Shadow Charizard, better into fighters, the Incineroar going to be better into stuff like the ghost types. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.